This is Radio 4.
We present the News Quiz of the Year with your chairman, Barry Took.
Hello and welcome to the last show of the year, in which we'll be finding out what, if anything, our panellists remember of 1988. But as ever, we begin with a ridiculous item from the press, read by our newsreader of this week, Brian Perkins. This item was sliced by Mr. R. Crome from the Oxford Times.
Research has just been published by doctors at a leading local hospital. It fills several pages and has 2 graphs and 6 tables. Its main conclusion is that in an accident between a truck and a pedestrian, the pedestrian is more likely to be taken to hospital.
And now let's welcome our panel, who are, on my right, a team who are knowledgeable, witty, clever, but never actually win. Private Eye's own Richard Ingrams and Ian Hislop. On my left, the former editor of the Daily Telegraph, Bill Deeds, who's next to the editor of The Listener, the one and only Alan Corran. Round 1 now, which we start with this sad tale from the Daily Express.
Thieves stole 60 cassettes from housewife Primrose Marshall's car, but all 5 Des O'Connor tapes were left behind.
And now this welcoming question for Richard Ingrams. Richard, politically speaking, how did 2 sides meet in the middle with an exchange of letters?
Well, it's to do with SLDs and SDPs and
That's right.
all their various mergers. They did have a sort of merger, but then it ended up with about 5 different parties instead of 2 as there were before.
Yes, and now there's a party of 2, and there's a party of about 4.
Yes.
There's a party of 1 called David Owen. He's on his own still.
Yes,
And
it all concerns the merger of the Liberals and the Social Democrats to form a party lumbered with more names than a royal baby. And Ian, we greet you with this question. Can you tell us the one about the Irishman who thought he had the freedom of speech?
This is one of Mrs. Thatcher's new measures, which says that no one who supports the IRA can be televised on television. Actually, that sounds rather silly. It did when she said it as well. You can actually report what they said, so you can have Sir Alistair Burnett or one of those men saying, "Good evening, today Mr. Jerry Adams said this," but you can't have Jerry Adams saying it, because that would be in some way harmful. In fact, if you saw Jerry Adams saying it, you'd think there's a loony, which would be much better for all of us.
It's all about the government's decision to ban all television and radio interviews with dangerous political fanatics such as the IRA, Sinn Féin and junior health ministers. And we pause now for some more nonsense from the press. This time it's the New Forest Post.
A spokesman for the firm said, "We aim to bring the hotel up to 4-star status to go with its 3-star service."
Honesty in advertising there. Bill Deeds, we welcome your return with this question. What lost heart, went off the dole, and ended up behind a bush?
No, I must say you worded it well. I may have been abroad at the time.
I hope you were.
Well, Bush. Are we talking about the American presidential election?
Yes.
I thought we might be. I find it very difficult to distinguish the various characters involved. But no doubt the best man won in the end, and we shall hear more from him. And Mrs. Thatcher's pleased about it. That's very important, isn't it?
I can remember my favourite primary joke, Bill, when Hart had been caught with his hand in the honey jar. And this joke was going around. People were saying to one another, "In my heart, I know it's Bush, but in my bush, I know it's Hart."
Heart's still in the right place.
The question is about who ended up behind Bush, really.
J. Danforth Quayle.
Another good primary joke. It wasn't a primary joke, it was an election joke. Why did the chicken cross the road? To join the Indiana National Guard.
A bonus point for the Private Eye side. And let me tell you the answer. It's all about the election of the 41st President of the United States, George Bush, with his youthful Vice President, Dan Quayle, the man who, when asked to deliver a paper to Harvard students, cycled around the university and chucked it in at the front porch. Alan Corran, a musical aid memoir for you now.
Memories like the corners of my mind, misty watercolor memories of the way we were.
Barbara Streisand and The Way We Were. Alan, who used his lapses to cover his lapses?
This is about Reagan.
Oh, no, it's not
Is it
about
not?
Reagan.
Lapses
Give you a
of
slight
memory.
clue.
Lapses of memory, to cover his lapses of memory.
Lapses of memory from way back then.
Oh, yes.
Then we
I
did
thought
not
Reagan was a memory lapse man, but of course what he had forgotten was nothing to what Waldheim, to whom I'm sure your wonderful Viennese accent was referring. No wonder I thought it was Reagan. It could have been anybody. It could have been... I thought for a moment it was Billy Connolly, actually, but... Yes, this
It was supposed to be Paulie Yates, come on. The question concerned the war crimes report on the Austrian president that started an epidemic of chronic amnesia, or Waldheimer's disease. And we come to the end of the first round, which takes us up to about April. And the scores are Alan and Bill 4, but Richard and Ian, who have scored a bonus, 5, and in the lead. And now round 2, which we begin with this item from the Aberdeen Press and Journal.
Stella Surth of Tasmania was fined $200 for marking the first anniversary of her widowhood by dancing on her husband's grave and singing Who's Sorry Now?
Well, it's better than Neighbours. And we thank Mrs. Clark for sending us that. Richard, your question now. Who went to Africa and saw the sights, mainly on the gun barrels aimed at him?
Well, the answer to my question is usually the Archbishop of Canterbury. But as far as I can recall, I don't think he did go to Africa.
He didn't. It was someone else.
Yeah, I knew who it was all the time. Welsh Johnny.
That's a grasp of political wind, yes? That yes. Welsh Johnny.
Yes.
God.
Well, he went off to Africa. This is something that my friend Grocer Heath complained about to me when I interviewed him recently. He said, you should always be in the House, if you're leader of the opposition, you should be in the House of Commons in July, because that's the time that everything goes wrong. But their old boy O'Kinnock couldn't resist going off to Africa. And he refused to go and see South Africa, but he stood on the edge of South Africa and looked across with some binoculars so that he could see all the ghastly things that were going on there. And then he was quite rightly arrested.
There's no flies on you, Richard. You really get to the heart of it. Oh dear, it's all about Neil Kinnock, leader of most of the Labour Party. Or at least some of the Labour Party, whose plane landed unexpectedly at the wrong Zimbabwean airport. Very unexpectedly, he thought he was going to Mallorca. But as no one there recognised the greatest living Welshman, they held him at gunpoint until he explained himself. 3 weeks later, they interrupted him and unconditionally surrendered. Ian Hislop, a question for you now. Who was brought to book proving right was wrong?
This sounds like a spy catcher question.
It is a spy catcher question.
I don't remember Wright being wrong. I sort of remember him winning. And Mrs. Thatcher being humiliated and proved to have wasted huge amounts of taxpayers' money. But then I've got a very odd memory.
You've actually got the answer. I know that the question is pretty obscure. All concerns Her Majesty's government failed action to stop the publication of Spycatcher because, as anyone will tell you, you can't judge a book by its cover-up.
The trouble is now I hear that the book's legal. It's not selling at all because it's a terrifically dull book.
But everybody's bought it. They don't need to buy it again.
He made a million.
Made a million out of it.
A lot of people make a million out of dull books, Bill. Don't look so surprised. The name Jeff Archer comes to mind.
Yes, but a brief respite now as Mr. Perkins delivers another oddity, this time from a journal published by the Ministry of Agriculture.
Experience of previous years suggests that a high mortality rate among turkeys may be expected this month.
Oh, dear me. Well, that was scissored by Mrs. Wyatt of Norwich. Bill Deeds, here's your clueful tune. Well, the question is, who had 200 candles on an upside-down cake? Or, who had 200 candles on an upside-down cake, sport?
Another Welsh question.
Are we talking about Australia?
Yes.
I thought we might be talking about Australia. Well, down under they've had this birthday. It all began when we sent the wrong uns. We sent some of the worst citizens we've got. I mean, one hates to describe them as convicts. It upsets the Australians very much. But 200 years ago, a lot of convicts landed there, and time has rolled on, and 200 years have passed, and now they're celebrating it.
Quite right.
And they've enjoyed every moment of it. I've been there. And they've enjoyed it on Australian beer, which is amazing.
Yes, well, this does refer to the Australian bicentennial, the celebrations to mark 200 years as the royal family's holiday home. And if we remember that the first Australians were sent out there because of criminal records, you can see why they sent us Kylie Minogue. That's for our younger listeners, both of them. Alan, your question now. Who sprinted home after his career took a powder?
Do you want to do an accent? Do you want to do a Canadian black accent? Ben Jonson, born Canadian? No, born West Indian, wasn't he?
Jamaican.
Woke up and found himself a Canadian. One of his brief waking moments during his running career. And managed to sprint extraordinarily quickly through being on a cocktail of forbidden drugs.
Is he still the fastest man in the world?
Absolutely. He's the fastest man in the world, sitting in bed. It's a reference to his being on speed. I don't know who is the fastest man in the world, because they were all on it, weren't they? Didn't we?
Frank Boff now, I think.
Happy New Year, Ben Jonson, we say, don't we?
And good luck to you. This is the sorry tale of Canadian sprinter Ben Jonson, the world's fastest private patient, stripped of his Olympic gold medal after drug tests proved that he was on steroids. His fellow sprinters apparently claimed that he was on so many tablets that he needed a tracksuit with a child-proof top. Round 3 now, and a cutting from the Times.
Mr. Alan Jones of Kent was due for further X-rays to check for internal injuries after talking with Mrs. Thatcher.
Good enough for Ian Hislop, that one. Richard, why did Ladies' Night Out make the 6 o'clock news?
A group of gay ladies, as I shall refer to them, invaded the 6 o'clock news, thinking it needed livening up. They were quite right. And they had to be took away and arrested and given jobs in the BBC, no doubt. Sorry, no, I withdraw that. I'm sure
No, you're absolutely right. It
all
all refers to an edition of the 6 o'clock news when Nicholas Witchell tried to read the bulletins with a protesting lesbian handcuffed to his chair and was made to promise never to do it again. And here, a healthy subject for you, Ian, helped along with...
I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way.
Ian, why will eyes and teeth cost an arm and a leg?
This is dental charges and eye charges.
Quite right.
To get tested now, you will have to pay instead of it being free as it used to be. And the reasoning behind this is nil, as you would expect. And it just seems like a terrifically good idea at the time. So they pushed it through. And all the backbenchers said, "This is absolutely outrageous. We'll vote for you, Mrs. Thatcher." And it went through. So you've got to pay now.
That's right. This one concerns the government's plan to introduce a charge for eye tests and dental checkups, all of which maintains our reputation for having the best free health service money can buy. My teeth are owned by the National Westminster Bank. Now, Bill D, it's your question. Who were meanly tested when what was said wasn't?
That's very Delphic. That really is very Delphic indeed. Just ponder on that one.
Who do you think it's that?
Nigel
It's
Lawson.
about Nigel Lawson, old people. About old Nigel Lawson.
Old Nigel.
How old Nigel Lawson? Old
Oh,
Nigel Lawson,
you
fine.
mean the attempt he made to means test the old people? Well, the briefing he didn't give, that's right.
That's the one.
He gave a briefing that wasn't a briefing, but after a bit it became clear that he had in fact said that if he could get away with it, he was going to means test the old people. It was a very complicated weekend, and as usual, it all came back to the Sunday newspapers. Not one of his great days now.
No, he hasn't had many of those lately, it must be said. This is all about British journalists, to whom Chancellor Lawson leaked details of the means testing to be applied for a wide range of benefits. Later, he formally released a leak that he hadn't leaked anything of the sort. And Alan, the final question of this round, where was a famous shopper shopped?
It's Imelda Marcos, the one with the shoes. Yes, the woman with all these millions of shoes who went to New York and bought all the shoes in New York. And as she was leaving the last shoe store with the last pair, she was leapt on and served with a subpoena to appear and give all the money back that she and her husband are alleged to have embezzled.
You're absolutely right, Alan. This is about Imelda Marcos, who used her New York court appearance on corruption charges as a chance to catch up on more important issues like shopping. She was heard to say to an assistant at Macy's that she just wanted something comfortable to slip into, like Switzerland. The scores at the end of that round are still much as they were. Alan and Bill 12, but Richard and Ian still in the lead with 13.
No hope.
And now the final round, which we open with a sadly credible piece from the Birmingham Evening Mail.
A rundown Birmingham housing estate is being funded by grants from central government, totalling £1.25.
Thanks to Martin Wilkinson for sending us that. Richard, a musical clue for you. Richard, who found all roads led to a dead end?
Well, I'm not familiar with that music that was played. I was hoping that someone would start singing after a bit. Is it a signature tune?
This is
from
a signature tune of a sort, yes.
I told him
thought-
it was Acid House, and he believed me.
Well, it was about a pretty dodgy house, let's put it that way.
Well, it is some appalling television programme that's
Yes.
either going to start or come to an end. I can't remember.
That widens the field a little.
It was called Crossroads.
Oh, well done.
It's like
gave-
drawing teeth.
There was a little mime there from the scorer, which was very helpful. She crossed her two fingers to give me a little clue. Yes, Crossroads.
You don't have to go on beyond that.
Reference to South Africa, surely.
Unless she was miming Soweto. I don't think she would.
It all refers to Central soap opera Crossroads. The actors were finally deemed so wooden, the show had to close as a fire risk. It was finally replaced by the test card, which doubled the audience and considerably livened up the storyline. Ian, your question now. If lunchtimes are a headache, why have you all day to drown your sorrows?
This must be all-day drinking, is it?
Yes, it's that.
Well, it's not all day. It's sort of all afternoon. And not on Sundays.
Yes.
Right.
And it hasn't made any difference to anything, has it?
Not a scrap. It seems to me that pubs keep closed just as much as they used to.
Except in Soho, where they keep open all day just as they used to anyway.
Well, you have more knowledge about that than I do.
Does anybody really want to drink at 4 p.m.?
Can we have a vote in the audience here? Yes, there's a few Australians at the back.
Some of your colleagues, Bill, on the Telegraph, I can think of. I won't.
All coming out now.
Won't name any of them.
The answer to the question is because in August this year pubs were allowed to open all day by extending the 10 minutes chucking out time to 14 hours. Mrs. Thatcher has said that the new ruling has completely solved the problem of what to do with Dennis during the day. Before Bill's question, here's another item from the Aberdeen Press and Journal.
As part of a new efficiency study, hospitals will soon have to distinguish between those patients who leave the hospital cured and those who are carried out dead.
Our medical correspondent there was Mr. Charles Murray. Bill, your swan song is in answer to this. Who broke the ice but had to be helped away from the party?
Very good question, indeed.
Was it tremendous fuss in the Arctic?
Tremendous fuss in the Arctic. Or was it the Antarctic?
No, it doesn't matter, really.
Arctic.
Arctic. Very important to get that right. Anyway, for days and days, our attention was monopolized by the fortunes of... It began with 3 whales, and then, if memory serves, 1 died. And then there were 2. Well, that's how I make it. I mean, that's what Anyway, there were 2 whales, and eventually a gap was cut in the ice, and they went away. What's happened since, I can't tell you anything about. Where they are now, and lost. I have to end the story with the fact that they were released. But
Good.
I'm not in touch.
They were attacked by the Duke of Edinburgh later on.
Perhaps they'll phone in if they hear this broadcast. Here's the tale of 2 whales trapped in an ice hole in Alaska and eventually freed in a multi-million-pound rescue thanks to a Soviet icebreaker. Apparently the confused whales had put their heads above the surface, took one look at the hordes of press and hangers-on, and then dashed off to find a Save the Eskimo T-shirt. The whales left happily and are unlikely to pop up again, except perhaps in a tin of Japanese soup. And finally, Alan Corran, a problem blasphemously topical. Which false impression wasn't improved by age?
This is almost certainly then the Turin sheet.
It is.
Which turned out to actually be the Turin duvet or futon, being manufactured by silkscreen printing technique perfected by Mr. Conran about 4 weeks ago. Anyway, it was... they sent it off to Boots and had it developed, and when it came back, somebody said, "That's not the fella." And I think it's just a little bit, just a tiny bit bogus, and it upset the Pope very much. But the Jesuits have rallied round, and they've now got an argument for why it's much better for it to be fraudulent because it focuses our thoughts.
And the Jesuits have an argument that God made some things new and some things old, so carbon dating doesn't fox them at all. Just thought I'd throw that in. It's actually true.
Well, just like Bill, who doesn't know where the whales are, or Ben Johnson. I mean, what have they done with the Turin? Is it back on the wall? I mean, what have they done with the Turin shroud?
I don't know.
Gone to Sotheby's.
Mapper Turin, it is. You are here. Well, yes. Ahoy fugaces, I think.
It all concerns the Turin shroud, which by carbon dating was revealed to be 14th century. The truth only came to light when the scientists were finally allowed to take a few inconspicuous strands from the corner of the sheet just next to the inscription, "Not to be removed from the Turin Holiday Inn." Officials from the Catholic Church Museum who vouch for the shroud now admit to being ecumenical with the truth. Pun of the year. And now, as the very last news quiz of this series gets on its sleigh and jingles home, it's time to ask if our panel have found any interesting cuttings from the press this year.
Well, I have a festive item from the Edinburgh Evening News. It says, "Why not try venison this Christmas? Various cuts on sale now at the Trout Farm."
Ian. No connection.
This is the Louth Leader, an interesting column called Around and About. The November meeting of the Methodist Women's Fellowship was held in Grimoldley Chapel. Joyce Ward supervised the tombola. Mrs. Jill Brumby and Mrs. Marie Brumby invited guests to guess the weight of the cake. Mr. Bass Bell was in charge of the popular whisky game, and Mr. David Chamberlain of Six Hills found the buried treasurer.
Bill, what have you brought for us?
Well, this is from the Shield Gazette, and it's about a man, rather dozy man called Mark Allen, who says, "The first thing I knew about it was when I woke up to find the room full of firemen. I did not know what they were there for, so I went to bed."
Oh, dear. I hope you get your own series out of this. I really do. Alan, and what have you got for us?
Well, mine was a major, some would say the major story from The Independent this year. Factory worker Matthew Boyer sliced his golf shot while playing outside the perimeter of Benin's Air Force Base. The ball struck a bird, which promptly smashed into the windscreen of a jet as it was about to take off. The pilot lost control and ploughed into 4 other aircraft, the entire Benin Air Force, destroying them all. Mr. Boyer, who earns £180 a year, has been charged with hooliganism and fined £26 million.
But we do understand that he's been given time to pay. Let me tell you the scores at the end of the contest. And they are, amazingly, Alan and Bill, a brilliant 16, but Richard and Ian, an even more brilliant 17. The year's winner. They will be dope tested immediately after the recording. Before we go, we'd like to thank everyone who sent in cuttings for the series. We leave you with seasonal greetings and a second chance to hear our own dear Perkins read one of the most bizarre and certainly the longest cutting of the year. It's the dustbin arrangements published by Bucks District Council.
Part of the Thursday collections will be made on Christmas Eve, but collections normally made late on a Thursday will be made on the Tuesday after Christmas, together with collections normally made on a Friday. Monday and Tuesday collections will be made on the Wednesday and Thursday after Christmas, with some Tuesday collections left until the Monday after New Year. During the week after New Year, therefore, some Tuesday collections will be made on Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and Friday collections on Thursday or Friday. Merry Christmas.
With that, from all of us, until the next series of the News Quiz, goodbye.
Taking part in the News Quiz of the year were Richard Ingrams, Ian Hislop, Bill Deeds, and Alan Corran. The news was read by Brian Perkins, and your chairman was Barry Took. The programme was written and compiled by John Langdon, and the producer was Bill Dare.